All right, it is time for part 3. We're going to break oxidative phosphorylation down into 2 parts, the electron transport chain and then chemiosmosis. Electron transport chain, just remember, one does not simply pass through the cell membrane, especially if one is an ion, and we are going to be talking about ions. All right, so here is just a simple diagram. See? Easy, no problem. This whole thing is just a process of like breaking down really complicated things and hoping that by the end they don't seem so complicated anymore. All right, so here is our inner mitochondrial membrane. Okay, and notice that we have a bunch of proteins that are embedded in this membrane. These are the proteins that are going to do this process of the electron transport chain and oxidative phosphorylation. The intermembrane space is out here, and the mitochondrial matrix is in here, okay? So we're going to break down all of these steps, and then this final step we're going to do in a separate recording. All right, so the electron transport chain. It's going to, and I know this is complicated, transport electrons. Okay, okay. So these proteins embedded in the inner mitochondrial membrane are going to transport electrons across, harvesting the energy from those electrons, and use that energy to push hydrogen ions or protons across the inner membrane into the intermembrane space. So notice that we have NADH and FADH2 approaching these complexes and then splitting. Okay, so that's what we're going to talk about as we go through these next slides. All right, so it starts with complex 1. You're going to be grateful that these complexes are named in order because when we get to photosynthesis, they're not. Okay, so just beware of that. In this one, they're named in order. Okay, so complex 1. NADH is going to bind with this complex 1 and hand off the hydrogen atom. Remember, this is a whole atom. The complex 1 is going to split the atom into a proton and, a proton goes this way and an electron. The proton is going to get pushed across the membrane into the inner membrane space. The NADH and the other H+, the other proton, are going to end up here inside the matrix. Okay, now this is complicated because it's shown differently on different diagrams, like how many hydrogens actually get pushed across. It's complicated. So I don't actually need you to know how many hydrogens get pushed across at each step. Just know there's a lot of them. That's what's important. There's a ton of hydrogens that get pushed across the membrane. Okay, the electron is transferred to this protein here, which is called ubiquinone and indicated by the letter Q. Why Q? Because I guess U was taken. I don't know. Why is it called ubiquinone? Because the person who discovered it, I guess, thought that it was ubiquitous or everywhere. And so ubiquinone. Ubiquinone is just a carrier. It's just an electron carrier. All it does is take the electron from one place to another. One place to another, one place to another. Grabs an electron from here, grabs an electron from here, dumps it off here, goes back. That's all it does, just an electron carrier. Okay, complex 2 is going to bind with FADH2, dump off another hydrogen, another electron, give that electron to ubiquinone. The hydrogen ion does not actually go here. The hydrogen ion is going to go to complex 3. Okay. At this point, ubiquinone has 2 electrons. It picked up one here, it picked up one here. Okay. So ubiquinone now has been reduced. Remember, gaining an electron is reduction. Q gets reduced to QH2 and goes to complex 3. All right, complex 3. It's actually 2 protein complexes, cytochrome B and cytochrome C. This is cytochrome C. This is the cytochrome B. It's going to receive the electrons from the ubiquinone, and it's going to use the energy in those electrons to push 2 hydrogens across the membrane. Okay, so the hydrogens from here, they're going to go across the membrane. It's going to pass the electron the electrons to cytochrome C. Cytochrome C can only carry one at a time. So it's going to go doop, doop for every 2 hydrogens pushed across the membrane. Ubiquinone and cytochrome C, they just carry electrons. That's all they do. And then we get to complex 4. This is a really complicated one. It's 3 cytochrome complexes. You don't need to know their names. It's going to receive the electrons from cytochrome C. And notice there's nothing else to pass them to, no other protein in the membrane. Instead, it's going to pass them back into the matrix to oxygen. Yeah, we got oxygen hanging out here. Now, notice it says 1/2 of an oxygen molecule. So we're going to take oxygen gas and split it and reduce. Yes, add electrons too. We're going to reduce the oxygen. Okay. We're also going to take 2 hydrogen ions that are floating here in the matrix and combine those to the oxygen and make water. So this process of making ATP also makes water, which is kind of cool. So why do you dehydrate? Because your cells are using up water in other places, all right? Now, it also pushes 2 hydrogen ions across. So we've got 2 that are going to get bound to oxygen to make water and 2 more that get pushed across. So again, we're pushing a ton of hydrogen ions across this inner membrane into the intermembrane space. And that's important because we've created a concentration gradient. I know, we've created what we call an electrochemical gradient, meaning that it is a chemical gradient. There are more hydrogen ions in the intermembrane space than in the matrix. And it is an electrical gradient, meaning that we have more positive charge in the intermembrane space than in the matrix. What do you do with a concentration gradient? Well, a concentration gradient is a form of stored or potential energy. We can use that potential energy, transform it into kinetic energy, and use that kinetic energy to do stuff, and that's what we're going to do. How cool is that? So, to review, we've got 4 complexes in the intermembrane space that make up the electron transport chain. They push hydrogen ions or protons, because remember, once we've taken off the electron, all that's left is the proton and a neutron, and nobody cares about the neutron. So proton. So we have a bunch of protons, that have been pushed across the membrane by these complexes, using the energy in the electrons that were passed from one complex to the next by ubiquinone and cytochrome C. Okay, so that's the electron transport chain. It transports electrons and uses that energy to create a concentration gradient of hydrogen ions or protons, and we make water at the end. Now, in the next step, we're going to talk about what happens here in this final step and where this hydrogen here actually comes from. All right.